Montana Territory. September 1883. The wind howled through the tall grass just east of Miles City the moment Bernadette Waverly jumped from the stagecoach with her carpetbag clutched tight in her hand and a heart that had been torn apart just 3 days earlier. She had fled in the dead of night, leaving behind lace dresses, her mother's pearl comb, and a man who had promised forever but gave her shame. Her boots touched red dirt and she did not look back. "Ma'am?" the driver called. But Bernadette was already walking, head down, away from the town, the road, and everything that smelled like lies. She had trusted Warren Gates, a banker's son who wore fine hats and sweeter words. They were to marry in October. But on Sunday, she found him in the barn with her cousin, laughing, shirtless, without shame. He had not even tried to explain. Bernadette did not scream. She packed her bag, took what little money she had in her sewing tin, and paid the first coach west. By late afternoon, the Montana sky had opened itself wide and blue above her, the sun beginning to fall. She stood at a crossroads where the coach trail met a dusty cattle path. There was nothing but quiet and the sound of hooves. A single rider came into view, sitting tall on a chestnut gelding. His hat was low, shadowing his face, but his shoulders were broad and his coat was worn. A lasso hung from his saddle. He was dust-covered and honest-looking in a way that made her chest ache. The rider slowed. "You lost?" he asked. Bernadette blinked. "I am not sure." He dismounted and led his horse a few steps closer. His voice was low, gentle. "Name's Isaiah Zeller. I work the McKinnon spread a few miles north." "You headed that way?" "No," she said. "I do not think I am headed anywhere." He nodded once. "Fair enough. It is a hard thing, being between places." She looked at him then. Fully. He was not polished. He had calluses and sunburn on his neck and a scar under his chin that looked like a story. He was probably no more than 25, maybe 26. Close to her own age of 23. His eyes were steady. Isaiah glanced at the bag in her grip. "You running from something?" She did not answer, but she did not lie either. He saw that, and he did not press. "Well," he said, "there is an old line shack a mile from here where I bed down sometimes. You can rest there. Nobody around for miles. I will ride slow so you can walk beside." She hesitated, but the dust on his boots, the quiet in his voice, it was a kind of safety she had not felt in a long time. "All right," she said. They walked together in silence. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in orange fire. He did not ask her name. He did not ask her story. He just stayed beside her, one hand on his reins, the other swinging easy at his side. At the shack, he tied up his horse and opened the door. There was a cot, a small stove, and a wooden crate for sitting. It smelled like cedar smoke and old earth. "I will sleep outside," he said. "You will be safe here." "Thank you," she said, her voice catching. He nodded and stepped back out into the dusk. Bernadette lit the lantern and sat on the cot. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear this time. From something else, relief maybe, or exhaustion. Through the thin door she could hear Isaiah moving, dragging a saddle blanket near the fire pit. He was humming low under his breath. Not a tune she knew, but it was soft, honest. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and eggs. When she stepped outside, Isaiah was crouched over the fire, frying pan in hand. "You planning to keep walking?" he asked without looking up. "I do not know," she said. "I have no place to go." "Well," he said, handing her a tin plate, "I could use help for a few days. Calves need tending. Fences need mending. I will pay you fair." She took the plate. "I do not know anything about cattle." "You learn fast," he said. They ate in silence. The wind was cooler that morning. When he stood, he looked at her fully for the first time. "You got a name?" "Bernadette," she said. "Waverly." He smiled. "Not big. Just enough." "All right then, Miss Waverly. Let us get to work." They rode together that day across rolling hills and past cottonwood trees. He showed her how to move around calves without spooking them, how to hammer a fence rail straight. He never once looked at her like she was fragile, and he never once asked about the past. That night, they sat by the fire again, and he passed her a cup of coffee. Her fingers brushed his. It was small, but it burned. "You ever been in love?" he asked quietly. "I thought I had," she said. He nodded. "Me too. Once." She looked at him. "What happened?" "She wanted more than this life," he said. "I could not give it." Bernadette looked around. The quiet hills, the firelight, the steadiness in him. Maybe more is not always better. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. "You are not like the women I have known." "No," she said. "I do not think I am." He did not touch her. But he did not look away. That night, she lay in the shack again. But she did not sleep. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, and she listened to Isaiah breathe across the fire. And she thought maybe she had been given something better than what she lost. Something real, something honest, and maybe, just maybe, something like love was beginning to rise with the morning. The days stretched wide beneath the September sun, each one folding quietly into the next, like pages in a ledger. Bernadette woke early now, dressing by lantern light, her fingers stiff until the warmth of the morning fire reached them. She didn't ask for more than the cot and a place to work. Isaiah didn't offer more than what was needed, but there was a steadiness in him that began to feel like shelter. By the fifth morning, she saddled the old dun mare without being asked. The mare was slow on inclines, but patient, and Bernadette had learned to adjust her weight forward when the trail steepened. Isaiah watched her check the cinch, his hand paused halfway to his hat. "You were raised in town?" he asked, his voice thoughtful, not curious. "Yes, my father was a merchant. Dry goods and seed mostly." He gave a small nod, then turned toward the hills. They rode in silence until the grass gave way to brush and rock. A fence line lay half-fallen near a shallow creek, the rails scattered and sun-bleached. She tied the mare to a pinyon stump while Isaiah gathered the tools. He handed her a pair of rawhide gloves. "Hands'll blister otherwise." "I've had worse," she said, slipping them on. He didn't answer, just passed her a hammer. She drove the first nail wrong and bent it. The second went in crooked. By the fourth, it sat flush, and Isaiah stepped back from his post. "Don't force it. Let the weight do the work." Her arms ached by midday. They ate cold biscuits and jerky hunched beneath cottonwoods, knees brushing, not speaking. The sky was high and cloudless. Afterward, she poured creek water across her face and leaned against a rock, eyes closed. She was beginning to understand the kind of tired that came from use, not worry. It was a better kind. Isaiah sat nearby, knife in hand, whittling without hurry. The silence between them was not strained, it had a shape, like something earned. "My mother was half Blackfoot," he said, not looking up. Bernadette opened her eyes. "Did she grow up near here?" "North, closer to Two Medicine. She married a German farmer who didn't speak a word of her tongue. They made it work." He set the knife down. The carved scrap of wood tumbled to the ground, a faceless horse's head. "She died when I was young. Pneumonia." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "I remember her voice. That's enough." She reached for the carved piece but didn't touch it. "Did she teach you her language?" "Some. I forget most of it now." "Still," she said, "you carry her with you." He didn't answer, but his eyes softened. That night, she cooked beans over the fire while Isaiah sat sharpening his blade on a flat stone. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and his forearms were streaked with dirt and sweat. She handed him a tin bowl, her hand lingering a second longer than needed. He looked down at it, then up at her. "You ever think about what's next?" "I've only just stopped looking behind." "I didn't mean leaving," he said. "I meant choosing." She sat beside him, careful not to touch. "I don't know what I'd choose. You're not meant to stay at a line shack forever." "No," she said, "but I might not be meant to leave it yet." They ate in quiet, the beans overcooked, the bread forgotten in the pan. When the fire dimmed, he stood and fetched her bedroll from the shack without being asked. She took it, heart-thudding in her chest. "Thank you," she said. He didn't move right away. The space between them filled with something unspoken. "I sleep lighter than most," he said. "If you ever need." She looked up at him, the shadows gentle on his face. "I know." Later, she lay beneath the stars, the air sharp with the scent of pine. The night stretched wide overhead, and the wind moved through the grass like breath. She wasn't afraid anymore, and she didn't miss what she'd left behind. Not even a little. The first frost came quiet and early, painting the sagebrush silver by dawn. Bernadette woke with her breath fogging in the air and a stiffness in her joints that had nothing to do with age. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and stepped outside to find Isaiah already saddled up, one boot resting in the stirrup, his coat buttoned to the throat. "There's a steer missing," he said without looking up. "Tracks head west toward the gulch. You up for a long ride?" She nodded, pulling her braid over one shoulder. "Let me pack some bread." They rode without hurry, the horses picking their way through low scrub and frost-hardened soil. The sun climbed slow, casting slanted light across the hills. Bernadette watched Isaiah from the corner of her eye, how he leaned forward in the saddle just slightly when reading tracks, how his fingers never stopped adjusting the reins even when the trail grew faint. "You always been on your own?" she asked, not raising her voice. He didn't answer right away. "Had a half-brother. Older. Took off south when I was 15. Word is he joined a railroad crew in Arizona. Never wrote. Would you want to hear from him?" "I used to," he said. "Now I figure he's made his peace with the silence." They followed the trail past a stand of wind-bent pines, then down into a shallow draw where the cold air lingered longer. The prints grew muddled: coyote, deer, something heavier. Isaiah dismounted and crouched low, brushing the soil with his glove. Slipped a hoof on the incline. Might be limping. We'll cut north. Slow him before he reaches the river. As they rode, Bernadette found herself studying the land in a way she hadn't before. The ridges weren't just hills, they were shelter from wind. The trees weren't just trees, they held signs, warnings. She saw the way Isaiah moved within it all, not apart from it. When they found the steer near dusk, it stood knee-deep in a shallow ravine, tangled in brush but unharmed. Isaiah slid down the bank carefully, murmuring low to the animal, his hand steady on the rope as he loosened its hind leg. Bernadette stayed atop the ridge, watching. He didn't rush. He didn't scare it. When he finally led the animal back up the incline, sweat streaked his brow, and his coat was torn at the elbow. She took the rope from him. "Your arm's bleeding." "It'll keep," he said. "You lead him back. I'll follow on foot." "I can wait." "I know you can," he said, and smiled, not wide, but slow, like something earned. They made camp near a stand of junipers, too far to reach the shack before dark. Isaiah built the fire while Bernadette gathered pine cones and peeled potatoes with her belt knife. She handed him a tin cup of broth once it boiled, and he took it with both hands. "I'd forgotten what it's like to have someone stay," he said, voice quiet against the crackle of wood. She stirred the pot with a spoon. "I wasn't sure I would." "You think you will now?" "I think I want to." He nodded, the firelight catching the edge of his jaw. "When I first saw you," he said, "you looked like you'd been struck clean out of your own life." "I had. But you didn't break." She set the spoon down. "Not yet." He turned his cup in his hands, then looked up. "There's an empty bunkhouse down at McKinnon's main range. If you wanted to stay longer, work steady, they'd take you on." She didn't answer right away. The wind shifted through the trees, cold and soft. "I would rather stay near here," she said. "If that's something you'd want." His breath caught, just a little. "It is." The fire burned low. Neither of them moved to bank it. She leaned back against her saddle roll, knees drawn to her chest. He stretched out nearby, one arm folded behind his head. They watched the stars appear one by one. No sound but the wind and the occasional snort of the horses. "You think people can start over?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "I think some folks just needed the right place to begin," he said. She turned her head, met his gaze across the firelight. "And what if it's not a place, but a person?" He didn't look away. "Then I reckon you've already begun." She smiled, slow and true, and for the first time in weeks, her chest felt light. She didn't need lace or pearls. She didn't need promises written in town registers. She only needed what was here, this quiet steadiness. This man with dust on his boots and a voice like safety. And the warmth that came not just from the fire, but from being seen without question. 3 days passed since the steer had been found and camp made beneath the junipers. The days had cooled sharp and dry, and the grasses had turned brittle, breaking softly beneath the horses' hooves. Bernadette rose each morning before the sun, no longer needing Isaiah's quiet invitation. She moved with purpose now, sleeves rolled, skirts tucked, her hair braided tight. That morning, Isaiah took her further west, beyond the fence lines and familiar grazing slopes, into broken country where the land opened into shallow ravines threaded with cottonwoods. They were scouting for winter shelter. The year's first snow rumored by a ranch hand who'd passed near the shack the day before. "When the wind comes down from the beer paws," Isaiah said, "it can bury a man up to his ribs if he's not paying attention." She shielded her eyes, scanning the dry creek below. "How do you tell it's coming?" "Birds change course. Horses grow jumpy. And sometimes you just feel it in your teeth." They dismounted and walked the edge of the ravine, horses trailing loosely behind. The silence between them had grown fuller, more companionable, like the space between two worn chairs by a fire. As they reached the bend in the dry creek, Isaiah knelt beside a patch of disturbed soil. "Cougar," he said. "Days old, but still." She crouched beside him, studying the claw marks. "You've seen one." "Twice. Once when I was 13. It was watching a lamb from the rocks. Didn't move when I shouted. And the second time?" He looked off toward the ridge. "It didn't see me first. I was above it on a ledge. Watched it drink from a stream. It looked tired. Not dangerous. Just trying to live." Bernadette stood slowly, hands on her hips. "Strange how things can be both." He nodded. "Most things worth knowing are." They rode further until they reached a shallow cave set into a sandstone bluff, half hidden by a fallen cottonwood. Isaiah dismounted and stepped inside, his voice echoing low as he measured its depth. "Could keep a few yearlings here through hard weather," he said. "And maybe us if the trail gets closed." Bernadette leaned against the tree trunk, her fingers tracing the bark. "You think that'll happen?" "Hard to say. Weather's been shifting faster than usual." She looked toward him, the cave's shade drawing hard lines across his cheek. "If we were to stay here, just the two of us, what would that mean?" Isaiah stepped out into the light slowly, brushing dust from his hands. "It'd mean I'd have to learn to bake bread that doesn't turn to stone. And you'd have to get used to my snoring." She smiled but didn't look away. "And the rest of it?" He took a step closer, his voice low and steady. "It'd mean I'd want to build something that didn't vanish when the snow melts. Something that lasts." Bernadette's throat tightened, but she didn't let it stop her. "I didn't come here looking for that." "I know," he said. "But sometimes what finds us is better than what we thought we wanted." She reached up, brushing a thumb along the edge of his collar where a thread had come loose. "You don't wear polish or promises." "No," he said. "Just the truth. As best I know how to give it." She let her hand fall. "Then I'd stay here. With you. If that's what you want." His eyes didn't leave hers. "It is." They didn't kiss. Not then. Not yet. But something passed between them, a quiet agreement, unshaken by wind or time. That evening, they returned to the lined shack with the last of the light clinging to the hills. Bernadette stepped down from the mare and walked straight to the stove, setting kindling without being asked. Isaiah brought in the saddlebags and hung his coat by the door. As she stirred the stew, he reached for the tin plates. "McKinnon's got a carpenter," he said. "Old man with a bad hip. Says he's willing to part with a spare bed frame come next week." She tilted her head, curious. "And what would we need with one of those?" He set the plates on the table. Just thinking ahead. She didn't reply. Didn't need to. The silence was warm now, not empty. Later, after they'd eaten and the fire had burned low, Isaiah poured water into the basin and handed it to her first without a word. She washed, drying her face with the edge of her sleeve. When she looked up, he was watching her not with hunger, but with the kind of reverence that made her chest ache. "I never wanted to be rescued," she said. "I know," he answered. "You just needed someone who didn't walk away." She stepped toward him close enough to feel the heat off his skin. "You stayed. So did you." The wind rose outside, brushing against the shack like a whisper. Inside, it was still, and for the first time in either of their lives, there was no need to run. By the time the first snow came, it fell soft and slow, like the sky meant no harm by it. Bernadette stood outside the lined shack with Isaiah's wool coat wrapped around her shoulders, watching the flakes gather on the split rail fence. The world had gone quiet again, but not in the way it had when she'd first arrived. This was a softer quiet, full, not hollow. The kind that settled, not the kind that swallowed. Isaiah stepped out behind her, arms full of firewood. He walked past without a word, stacking the logs inside by the stove, then shaking snow from his shoulders as he shut the door. She followed him in, her hands pink from the cold. "You sure about this?" he asked once the fire caught again. She took her time, warming her fingers before answering. "I've never been more sure of anything." He nodded, setting the kettle over the flame. "McKinnon's wife sent a letter. Said the preacher's riding through next week to bless the new calves. She said we could ask him to stay for supper." Bernadette turned, eyebrows raised. "Is that your way of proposing?" He leaned against the table, arms crossed. But there was a flicker of something new in his eyes, hope, unguarded. "No. It's my way of saying I want to wake up next to you come spring. And all the winters after." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she crossed the room and picked up the carving he'd left beside the hearth days ago. The horse's head was still rough, but the lines were stronger now, more certain. She ran her thumb along the edge, then looked up. "You want a wedding in the snow?" "I want you," he said. She set the carving down and stepped close. "Then we'll ask him to stay for supper." They didn't kiss, not yet, but their hands found each other, and that was enough. The morning the preacher arrived, the snow was knee-high, and the trail to the main house had vanished beneath the drifts. Isaiah rode out alone to meet him, wrapped in his thickest coat, while Bernadette stayed behind, brushing flour from the table and setting out the tin plates she'd scrubbed to a dull shine. By dusk, the stove was burning high and the wind had picked up, but Isaiah returned with the preacher bundled behind him and a sack of winter apples tied to the saddle horn. The preacher's beard was thick with frost, and his voice was hoarse from the cold, but he smiled when Bernadette offered him tea and a place by the fire. They said their vows with the sound of wind against the shutters and the scent of apples baking in the pan. Isaiah held her hands like they were the most breakable thing he'd ever touched, and Bernadette looked into his eyes with something steady and deep. "I never thought I'd find this," she said. "You didn't find it," he said. "You made it." They ate supper together, the three of them, with quiet laughter and a single candle burning low. The preacher left before first light, the snow crunching under his boots, and Isaiah stood at the door until the man disappeared into the cottonwoods. By spring, the hills had turned green again. The calves were strong, the fences held, and the cave they'd found last fall now sheltered tools and grain sacks. Isaiah had built a second chair for the porch where they sat most evenings with their boots off and the scent of lilac on the breeze. Bernadette had taken to keeping a journal, though she wrote in it only when the mood struck. Some days passed without a word, others filled pages. She kept the carving on the shelf above the stove. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Isaiah had planted a small garden behind the shack, beans, onions, and a few rows of potatoes. She teased him that nothing would grow in that rocky soil, but by midsummer the vines had crept up the fence, stubborn as the man who'd planted them. One evening they walked the pasture, hands linked but silent. A hawk circled above and the cattle grazed without hurry. "You ever miss the life you had before?" he asked. She shook her head. That life never fit right. It was stitched all wrong. He looked down at her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. This one fits. She nodded. Like it was made for me. He kissed her then, slow and certain. Not like a man unsure of what he had, but like one who knew enough not to take it for granted. That night, they fell asleep with the windows open and the stars spilling in. And neither one of them dreamed of the lives they'd left behind, only the one they were making day by day. When fall returned, it brought no sorrow. Just another chance to begin again, side by side. And they never left. They didn't need to.